Okay, cool. As we sort of approach the 2 minute or the 5 minute past two mark here, I'll kick off with the boring stuff that nobody's here to hear anyways. um, Introduction of myself, just in case anybody isn't familiar with Humi. Yeah, my name's Simon. I'm one of the two CEOs actually here at Humi. We are a HR, payroll, and benefits software business. We specifically focus on working with small and medium-sized businesses here in Canada, and again, focusing on making businesses and people's lives easier through our software. If you're not a client, thank you for joining. Really excited to be able to be here today with Carly Home. Carly is a HR consultant, one of our favorites. We work with a lot, but she's definitely one of our favorites. And luckily, she's been working really closely with a number of companies throughout this time, focusing on leadership strategies specifically that teams can deploy to increase productivity, to keep motivation high, and to achieve a number of other things that I think are top of mind for business owners, for HR professionals, and just generally managers of teams during these crazy times. So without further ado, Carly's going to be carrying the ship here for the most part, and I'm just here to ask questions. So she's the smart one, and hopefully I can try to keep things entertaining. But Carly, do you want to add anything to that before kicking off?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Simon. So welcome everyone. It's great to have you here today. As Simon mentioned, I'm Carly Home. I'm the founder of Home & Company. We're a boutique HR consulting firm. Similar to Humi, we specialize in small to medium-sized businesses, helping them manage their people. We offer both virtual and in-house support, really for organizations that are too small to have their own HR team or HR manager, but big enough where they really need some help. Everything from employee relations, performance management, compensation reviews, talent management, and all types of leadership, mentoring, and support. So we do a lot of these webinars and leadership trainings as well. We partner with Humi as well, and we've relied on them more than ever, I'd say, during this time. We're finding our clients are needing this tool and using this tool and a lot of features that it has more than ever.
Nice.
Yeah, so it goes without saying, we're truly living in extraordinary times. The coronavirus pandemic has created massive uncertainty in so many ways, but in particular, it's changed the workplace fundamentally. And I think we're still figuring out what that's going to look like. As Simon mentioned, Shopify, I'm from Ottawa, major company here, shutting down their offices completely. So we still don't know what the future is going to lead, but we're truly living in uncertain times. And a lot of companies have had to pivot, including my own. So while we would typically be focusing on a lot of our HR day-to-day issues, we've had to pivot to help our clients navigate remote work, dealing with new and different employee issues, like employees who suddenly need to homeschool during the day, and designing new working models. But a big thing that we're seeing with our leaders is, how do I lead during uncertain times? How do I be the leader that I need to be when I have no idea what the heck's going on myself? So that's what we've designed here. We're going to break up the agenda today into two parts. So we're going to talk about some leadership during uncertainty. And then I want to dive a little bit into some effective coaching in a remote environment, because coaching now is more important than ever.
For me, I'm actually really excited for all of this, because I feel like you hit the nail on the head. I feel like that person that you just described, totally lost. This is totally uncertain. We're trying to figure out, we had to make a lot of changes. So I actually haven't seen this presentation, and I'm just as excited as probably everybody on the call to see this and hear some of the things that you have to say.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right into it. So whenever we're talking about navigating through change, I'd say the most important thing to do, especially now, is to acknowledge the difficulty. I mean, it's so tempting as leaders to put on our brave and our happy face and say, everything's fine, we're going to get through this. And while it's important to do that sometimes, it is also important to say, this is hard. It actually makes you more relatable and more human when you say that. I mean, we're all in this roller coaster of ups and downs every day. It's okay to acknowledge that and to say it yourself. On the same token, it's really important. We're going to talk about communication. Frequent and timely communications are more important than ever. So checking in on your team as often as possible, seeing how they're doing. I mean, not just how they're doing work-wise, but how they're doing personally, building that rapport, having it happen more than ever. Stability through consistent routines. Now, we all had routines before. These have all been flipped upside down, whether it's our commute that is no longer happening or certain team meetings. It's really important to develop some consistent routines. So again, we're talking about work routines as well as try to throw in some fun there. So I have a client who does trivia every Wednesday where 4 o'clock, you jump on Zoom, you grab a drink, stop talking about work, and we do some trivia. That's really fun. I have another client who's, they have an exercise Slack channel. So it's our COVID exercise group where they send different YouTube videos or different online workouts. And then a couple times a week, they'll get together and they'll actually do the workout together. So having some consistent routines when we're talking about work and non-work really, really gives people a sense of security. And then setting clear boundaries. Now, this is important as a leader as well as an employee and for the employees on your team. We're all at home. We're all at home pretty much 24/7. So it can be tempting to work all the time, be available all the time. But it also can be tempting to expect this of your employees, to say, well, I know they're at home. Why aren't they responding to my email? It's okay to set boundaries, and I actually encourage you to set them for yourself and allow your employees to set them as well.
I think this list is really interesting. Some of these things I feel like we've done okay, and other things I've seen other people do better than what we've done. And I think that it's my wife's company, the company that she works at, her office has implemented a lot of these things, and I actually aspire for our business to look more like that. They block. So in terms of boundaries, they're doing things like blocking lunch hours, and I think there's another hour in the day where nobody's supposed to have meetings. Mm-hmm. I think that some meetings are still happening, but putting that sort of routine in place where there's that set time aside, something that I think we might do. Also implementing those weekly like social events that maybe would have happened naturally in the office. Something that we haven't done yet either. We're just work. Yeah. But I see the positive effect of doing stuff like that because I'm directly, typically sitting next to somebody who has that happening in their office and think it would be really valuable. We're considering doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, these are spot on and not hard to do. And I kind of blame myself sometimes for not doing them yet. So I think they're good things to highlight.
Well, and it's hard, right? It's hard. Someone has to take the initiative to do it, and you make it optional. But I've seen them, and they're going over really well. So yeah, I highly recommend that you guys do. And then finally here, just to be flexible. Again, everyone's in completely different situations. It's hard for everyone in different ways. So you may have an employee who's suddenly stuck homeschooling and they can't take meetings during a certain time, but they're going to make up for it in the evening. Just as we're going through this difficult and completely unprecedented times, trying to be as flexible as possible, thinking outside the box in terms of expectations, forgetting the idea of 9 to 5. So important to getting through this and making people feel confident and comfortable.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, by the way, so I'm going to be posing questions throughout. And I just want to remind everybody who's on the call as well, there's a Q&A functionality built into the Zoom webinar at the bottom where you can ask questions as well. And I'll try to make sure that I get those questions through to Carly as we go. So feel free to ping us here as well if you have anything that's top of mind. I forgot to mention that at the end.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Definitely bring them on. We'd love to have a good discussion here. So in terms of communication, as I mentioned, it's absolutely essential. Employees do not like uncertainty. Communication it's always important, no matter what, even in great times, but especially during uncertain times. It's so important to increase, the level of communication, the frequency, and the consistency. An example here is our own Prime Minister. He, ever since the pandemic has started, he's gone on and he does his press conference every single day at 11 a.m. This builds transparency and honesty because we know what to expect. We know we're going to get an update every day. It makes you feel comforted and secured knowing that you're going to get an update. And sometimes the update is there is no update, or we don't know anything more, or there isn't any change. But even just having that communication, so critical right now. Now, an example is, when we fly, or I should say back in the days when we could fly, we could use airplanes, sometimes we experience turbulence, and oftentimes we'll be flying and the pilot will come on and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're going through a rough patch. There's going to be some bumps ahead. Flight crew, take your seats. When we hear this, we know things are going to change. We expect that there's going to be bumps. We fasten our seatbelts and we prepare. So when the turbulence does come, when the bumps do come, we feel okay because we've been given that heads up. We know that the pilot and crew are aware of the situation. So the same goes here in the workplace. As much communication, as much transparency and honesty as possible really, really helps our employees.
This one's an interesting subject in my mind. And again, I'm not going to try to interrupt you all the time.
No, please do. I love it.
This one for me is interesting because I've seen, two ends of the spectrum. Literally, there's a guy on our team and his wife, their company, the leadership did not acknowledge that this was happening until into April. Didn't even mention the word coronavirus, COVID, or anything into April, zero communication. And then on the flip side, I've seen companies where, leadership or members of the team are doing daily updates similar to the Prime Minister. And I think, in my opinion, neither are necessarily the right balance. I think that one might be overkill and the other one's obviously missing the mark in zero communication. Is there a frequency that you're seeing work well with companies that you're working with? Is there a style that you're seeing work well? Like, for instance, we leaned really heavily on video chats team-wide. We had a number of people in an anonymous survey say that they would love to see more written content. And then I remembered that people learn in different ways and like to receive information in different ways. So we're starting to layer written updates alongside video updates. Is there any best tips? I might also be like jumping ahead, like
no,
ahead of the horse here.
Yeah, but. No, that's good. And I totally agree with you. And no one needs more meetings on their calendar than necessary. I think that's also a risk that comes with remote work is suddenly, we need to meet all the time and we need to make sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so what I've seen done really well, and I recommend my one client, they actually have, they call it office hours. They do it 3 days a week, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where one of the senior leadership members, they'll have an hour in the late afternoon between 3 and 4 where people can drop in and it's completely optional. I think that's kind of the key there. So 3 times a week, they're having office hours where they can give general updates, talk about what's going on, talk about, how things are looking if we move into from phase 1 to phase 2, stage 1 to stage 2, and give general updates. So yeah, I agree every single day, especially if it's mandatory, is overkill, but you don't want to ignore the elephant in the room either. So I think at least weekly for general updates, but if not more, allowing it to be optional, I think is really great, and people like it.
That's a super cool idea. The open optional office hours for the people who want to hear it and want to be there. Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Yeah.
And even having a rotating leadership team member who runs them, just so that people can pop on, say hello, see what's going on. It's gone over really well.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. So I have here, this is kind of, just to help when we're talking about clear communication, we have here our 5 C's. Number 1 is to be clear. So knowing what you're going to say and take ownership. With this, we have to be concise. So there's nothing worse than someone, again, meetings for the sake of meetings and rambling leaders. We want to be direct. We want to be simple and to the point. So this is for both written communication as well as meetings, verbal communications. The less wordy, the better. And then we have here to be curious. So when it comes to communication, listening is just as important as speaking. So it's so important, especially now, to listen to your team's needs and wants. So asking them how they're doing, asking them if we can accommodate in different ways. I mean, again, we're at a point in time, we need to be flexible, we need to be accommodating, and we need to think outside the box a little bit. So acknowledging that these are unique circumstances, being curious as to what would help their lives be a little bit, make their lives a little bit easier, and having that two-way conversation. Next we have here is concentrate. So giving your team your full undivided attention. We're going to talk a little bit more about active listening, but if you're having a conversation with someone, not multitasking, not sending an email when you're on a Zoom call, people know when they're not listening to you. It makes you a more effective leader when people think you're actually listening to them. It goes both ways. And then being compassionate. So just showing that you truly care. As much as we do need to get the work done, we all have a job to do. And in a lot of cases, we're busier than ever. Having some empathy for the situation. I just wanted to talk about building trust a little bit. Nothing right now is normal. You know, in order to get through these times, we do have to trust our people in ways that we never have before. We have pretty much gone, most of us anyway, have gone from having an in-office workplace to going remote completely overnight. We haven't had time to prepare for this. Some big companies, you know, some companies spend months, if not years, preparing for flexible work. And we have done this within, you know, a couple of days notice. So we have to trust in our people. And the way to do this, you know, are two main ideas here. So fostering resilience, offering the support and the tools and the resources that they need to stay productive and efficient. So again, this goes back to asking for what they need. You know, maybe someone on your team could really use a second monitor because when they were in the office, they used 2 monitors. They work better that way. Being open to that. Also, acknowledging the emotional and mental health impacts. I mean, this is taking a mental health toll on everyone in one way or another. And I will say one mistake I've seen with some of my clients is they'll often assume that it's harder for someone because they have kids, for example. And, you know, if they're a young 20-something living by themselves, it's not as difficult. It's not true. And I've seen tons of different reasons why. You know, I have someone who is living with his partner who was immunocompromised, and they were told kind of at the last minute that the condo they were living in was going to be sold. So they had to have people coming through the condo. That caused a ton of stress for this couple because she suddenly had to have people coming into her place. She was going to be exposed. It's difficult for everyone. So acknowledging that no matter what someone's situation is, it's really difficult for them. You know, we're all, again, it's a roller coaster. We're all going up and down in different ways. And then ensuring that people are maintaining healthy habits is always a good thing to do as a leader. Again, I think we kind of see 2 things right now. We've been seeing people who are struggling to work and struggling to focus, but I've also seen the workaholic who is, you know, maybe more anxious about work, about their job, about their role, so they're working around the clock. As a leader, it's so important to recognize that, you know, make sure that they're shutting off, you know, ask them, you know, it's a beautiful day, make sure you go out for a walk, get some fresh air. So important to prevent burnout.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's been a big one. And I agree. There's those 2 buckets. And then there's the third, people who feel like it's just normal, right? Like if there was somebody who worked from home a lot, normal life, but those other 2 buckets are filling up like never before, where people are either underproductive and feeling beaten up and stressed out, or on the other side, overworking themselves. You know, one of the things that we tried to do really early was like to your point here, foster this sense of caring and try to show that for the people on our team, and also be very understanding of mental health, situations, of various sorts. And we probably, across the course of the first 3 weeks of being in quarantine, probably posted on our Slack channel 3 major messages around mental health. And even after that, we had somebody say, I wish that you guys would be more supportive of mental health, and do even more. And so I think that to us highlighted just how important this is. Like, we thought we were doing a great job, and I think that for the most part we were, but it can't be emphasized enough how much that it might be impacting certain people. And one of the things we did, and maybe this is the wrong choice, I don't know, I'm not an HR professional, and maybe my leadership style isn't for everybody, but one of the other things that we did here was also with some of the people who were struggling, in order to foster that sense of resilience, as you put it here, told people that it was okay to lower their own bar for a little bit and take it one step at a time in terms of readjusting their routine and their productivity, and found that to be hugely beneficial. The people who felt like they were underproductive all of a sudden fell into the group of overworking because they hit that low bar and then used the momentum to carry themselves further. And so I think that's all about carrying and building that resilience. So I think that's a great point.
Totally. And I think when it comes to all this, when it comes to any kind of communication, I think erring on the side of over communicating, at least for times like right now, is better than under communicating. And to your point, allowing people to lower that bar, adjusting expectations, right? So again, approaching the situation with empathy. We are in crazy times. We do not expect the same output when you have no support like you did. You have, depending, whatever your situation is at home, it's different and it's hard and it's challenging. So adjusting the expectations appropriately and being open-minded through this all.
And that it's such a key point. Like, I double down on this. Like, it's hard to say, okay, no, it's okay. Do a little bit less. Like, that's going to be better for you. And, I guess that will be better for us too. The truth is that it is, but it's really hard to get past that initial point. It's like ripping the Band-Aid off, right? Like, adjusting that expectation will have a positive net outcome long-term, but it's really hard in that moment. And for that first week or that first set of weeks where you're allowing yourself to tell, a team member to work fewer hours or output less than they were before in order to get back on their feet.
Totally. And again, we've been given no notice. This has all happened so quickly. I mean, we've been at it for a couple months now, but this is just new territory for all of us. We've never had to manage this way before. So it takes some extra effort. I just have this Ernest Hemingway quote here: the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. So, and that's where we are right now. Again, for leaders of teams where we're used to seeing them all day long, we know when they show up, we know when they leave, we know when they take their lunches, we make sure they're at their desk. Suddenly, we have to fully trust that they're getting their work done without any real oversight. So, but at the same time, I think we're going to learn a lot from this. Just have some kind of do's and don'ts here in terms of leadership principles to remember. So again, do normalize stress. It's normal. It goes back to what I'm saying before. It's okay to say this is hard. It's okay to say I'm having a hard day. It makes you seem more human. Again, increasing employees' sense of control over their work schedule. So that goes back to the adjusting work expectations. And then also encouraging people to take care of themselves, getting enough sleep, exercise, eating well, just going out for a walk, getting some sunshine. No one has an excuse not to do that. So really encouraging this. I think it's at the end of the day, it's going to help your employees be more productive. But then for don't neglect your own anxiety and concerns. Now, at the same token, I actually gave a similar presentation to one of my clients a couple weeks ago, and one of the senior leaders, she kind of piped in. She said, "Carly, this is all great, and I want to be a good leader, and I'm doing all the right things, but some days I'm struggling." She's like, "Some days I wake up and I am stressed out and I'm anxious about what's going on. Like, how do I how do I lead my team if I myself am I'm having a hard time? And I said to her, I said, it is like the number one thing you need to do. It's the whole oxygen mask example. You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can help others. Making sure that you're important too. Actually, at the end of that meeting, at the end of the presentation I gave, the team, they actually decided, the management team put together kind of a management session where they were making sure to check in on each other. This particular client, they were doing a great job with their team, but they weren't checking in as much with each other. So it's so important to check in with yourself. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're not human. Again, and not to ignore people's emotions, you know, keeping this open dialogue, showing compassion, but at the same time, don't let the uncertainty, don't let what's going on be an excuse for not getting the work done. We want to give a lot of grace to ourselves, to each other, to our teams, but at the end of the day, we do have a job to do, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here. So it's important to still get the work done. Now, in terms of an opportunity mindset, as I mentioned, I think a lot of you on the call, I know myself, I'm sure even Humi, this pandemic, this situation, it's given us the chance to pivot, right? And this could be a good thing. So I think as leaders, it's really important to say, it's really important to get our team to think about how we can look at the future environment. So look at the positive opportunities here too. I mean, creativity is absolutely optimal at during times like this. So looking for opportunities to innovate. So whether it's the way things have always done, maybe there's, you know, at a small scale, meetings that were happening that didn't need to happen. And on a larger scale, again, like in the case of Shopify, what can we change completely? How can we completely change to, you know, optimize our business for the future? A good way to do this as a leader is just to have your team focus on the higher priority items. So again, dropping the idea that everyone's working 9 to 5, being flexible, and encouraging some creative thinking, encouraging some brainstorming, you know, having people come to their meetings with different ideas. This is the time. This is the time to come up with different ideas, different solutions, and to help bring us to what the new world is going to look like.
I definitely agree with this point here in terms of having that opportunity mindset. I think that for us, I mean, you look at Shopify as an example, again, just because it's so timely today, shutting down all their offices, you know, forever, maybe. And that's a massive change, but it's something that, you know, many might say would have been the right call with or without this whole thing having happened, right? It's a cost savings. There's a lot of other benefits that might come from that. And, you know, as well for us, this accelerated some, you know, internal operational changes that we had been contemplating for a long time, and then, you know, made the change because of the situation. And, you know, whether you can use it as a catalyst for those types of changes, or even maybe as an excuse for certain changes that you were looking to make that could be beneficial to the business and now framed in a time of change, you know, can be put forward with people's mindsets a little bit more open. I think it's an interesting opportunity in that sense. Also, before jumping too far ahead, I also want to double back. We had a great question from the last slide around how transparent you think people should be about their own personal state of mind with their team. So, you know, if you are going through a hard time, how transparent should you be with your team? You know, is total transparency the right, you know, the right answer there in your opinion? I have an opinion actually on this one too. But that was the question is, you know, what are your thoughts on being super transparent, you know, while you're trying to lead?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of work and research done on vulnerability. It's a topic that I really like. If anyone's a fan of Brené Brown, you know, she talks about it a lot. I think vulnerability as a leader, it's really a new age way of thinking. I'd say the old school way would be to, again, put on that brave face, say everything's okay, we're fine, we're going to get through this. There's a lot of value in being vulnerable. But at the same time, there is a line. I mean, you don't need to come to your team and tell them, every single little detail of what's going on in your life and the fact that you're struggling. I think it's okay to say you are struggling, you are experiencing some anxiety, or you're having a difficult time homeschooling your children, for example. You don't need to go into the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah.
What your thought was?
Yeah, I mean, my thought is pretty similar, in that, being transparent is super important. It's something that I've always relied on in my life in terms of relating to people. And I think that leading is a lot about relating to the people on your team and building that trust. And it's hard to do without being transparent. And I think that, people, for better or worse, tend to connect more and open up more to people who they see as being similar to themselves, right? And like there's a lot of negative bias that's built into that. It causes a bunch of other problems. But in certain cases, it's actually a good thing, in that if you can show that you're vulnerable and therefore appeal to people on your team who are having similar struggles, you're likely to get more buy-in for the initiatives that you're driving. You're likely to get more sympathy for maybe your own shortfalls if it's impacting your own work. And at the end of the day, though, it's only about drawing that line between being honest and then creating fear within your work environment, which you don't want to do. I think that's the one thing that I'm always trying to avoid is creating an environment where you're allowing a negative view, whether it's your own or somebody else's, percolate throughout an organization and generate negativity that's broader. So it's like, is that be honest while staying positive, and that's kind of the balance that you have to strike, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. I think it's a very fine line. You don't want one extreme or the other. You don't need to tell your whole life story and issues and problems with your team, but at the same time, having that vulnerability, to your point, Simon, it makes you more relatable and builds trust. And when you build trust, your team's more likely to feel more secure and more safe themselves. Okay, so we're going to go on to part 2 here. We're going to talk about coaching and effective coaching in a newly remote environment. So, I mean, we can talk about coaching. We could do an all-day coaching session. I do hour ones. So this is really just a condensed, kind of giving you some good nuggets to think about, because it is different now that we are newly remote. I just have this quote here, anyone can lead when times are great. The great ones lead when things fall apart. So this is really, this is the time as leaders, this is our time to shine. This is our time to really take this difficult time and do what we can to move forward. We will get through this one way or another. So in terms of coaching, now, why is coaching important? Well, let's back up for a second. What is coaching? So it seems obvious. I think when you think of a coach, most of us think of a sports coach initially. But really, a coach is anyone who leads a team that actively and consistently delivers feedback in order to optimize performance. So we've all had good and bad coaches in our lives. I'm sure we can think of when we were younger, teachers, sports coaches, different managers, different leaders, different mentors. And we know a good coach can make or break the individual. I know a lot of people are probably watching the Michael Jordan documentary right now. He really, he shouts out to his coach, Phil Jackson, a lot for making, who is, if not definitely the best basketball player of all time, if not the best athlete of all time. So effective coaching is absolutely critical, not just in sports, but in the workplace as well. Now, coaching, it's really important to get it right, because when it's not done right, it can absolutely fail and backfire. So it's difficult. It's even more difficult now that we're in a remote environment, but I'd also say it's more important than ever. It really is, because people aren't getting that regular feedback that they're used to. So it's so important as a leader to be giving constant, regular feedback and coaching. And we're going to just go through a couple high-level ideas and tips here. So in terms of the results for effective coaching, it aligns the leader and their team members. So when they're getting that regular feedback, they know what's expected of them. They know what they're doing right. They know what they're doing wrong, and they're able to more easily course correct. It gives them that transfer of knowledge on a more continual basis. With my clients, I'm a big fan of regular performance reviews and regular discussions. It's actually, I'll say it's the one reason why I love Humi, because it gives the opportunity. Their performance management is fantastic because you can set it up as, whatever frequency you want. I like quarterly, but it also has a feedback section. So you can constantly give that feedback. And I'm actually seeing my clients use it now more than ever. The funny thing is, a lot of leaders, they can be hesitant to give the feedback. They don't want to seem like they're nitpicking, or they don't want to seem as though they're, giving them a hard time. But employees love feedback. They love it more than ever. Really, getting them more regular feedback, it gives them more self-confidence. So they actually feel it more confident when they're getting the regular feedback than when they're hearing it once or twice a year.
I fully believe in that as well. I think that, obviously we've done a lot of research internally on performance management, given that we have software that helps support it. But, one of the things that we drive home hard is offering feedback, constructive criticism to team members regularly. And even with that, what we often find when we poll, team members around things they want to hear more of, it's more constructive criticism. Like, people want critical feedback. And I think that it speaks to not only providing people with the right level of guidance, but also shows people that you care. Like, if you aren't nitpicking, quote unquote, right? Like, if you aren't, which some people get in their head about being a negative thing, but if you aren't nitpicking, then an employee probably doesn't think that you're even noticing, what the good parts of what they do either. So I think that that's huge. And I think it's like it is the backbone of coaching is paying attention, as Drew, and Drew on our team says, observation and role, and regular observation and role, and then feedback on that observation is like huge.
Yeah, it's massive. And it's more difficult now, right? Unlike before, when we were in the office, you could just pull someone aside and, give them that feedback right away. We have to figure out more creative ways of doing that, because we're all sitting in our homes. We're all, not necessarily picking up the phone or seeing them all the time. We have to be more mindful about doing it, so that people are getting the feedback that they need, especially when they're working from home and they're not seeing people from day to day. So in terms of effective coaching, I have a few kind of high-level items here. Really important things to think about when we are leading and we are coaching. The number one tip for effective coaching that I always say is to make it timely. There's nothing worse than stewing over something that you want to tell your employee, or saying, oh, I'm just going to wait for the next performance review. If there's some kind of constructive feedback you need to give, you need to do it as the behavior happens. Or if you can't do it as it's happening, because you don't want to do it in front of other people, of course, you do it as soon after as possible. I've had clients come to me with employee issues, and they'll be telling me a story about this client who this employee who said something wrong in front of a client. And, they need to make sure they're not saying that. And so I'd say, when did this happen? When was this client meeting? They said, oh, it was 2 months ago. I said, you got to give the feedback right away, because, 2 months goes by, they may not remember exactly how it happened. When you're doing it as in the moment as possible, it will help the employee take that feedback better, and you can be more specific about it. And then when we're coaching as well and giving feedback, ensuring that it's respectful. So making it about the behavior, not the individual. So in the example of an employee, maybe in a client meeting, maybe this employee is cutting off the client. And as the manager, you're sitting there in the meeting and you're seeing the employee, they're getting excited, they want to close the deal, but they keep cutting off the client, and you need to give this feedback. Instead of taking them aside after the meeting and saying, all you do is cut them off. You don't listen to them. You didn't let them hear them speak. You try to be respectful. You can even, again, vulnerability comes into it. We've all done that before. As a leader, you can say, listen, the meeting went well. I just want to mention to you, I found it was the minute the client had a hard time speaking. I know you were really excited to close the deal. I've done it before. Can you try to ensure that you're letting them finish their sentence before speaking up? Again, making it about the behavior, not making it personal to the individual. It really helps in that delivery. And then specific. So giving that specific example as soon as you can, clearly describing exactly what was good and bad. You wouldn't just say that client meeting went terrible. You'd give exact specific reason as to why. And then giving them some direction towards improvement. So telling them what they can do next time. Really, really critical in helping them make that change and improve. And then also making sure it's two-way. So when we're talking about coaching, again, with all communication, it's so important to listen. It's just as important to listen as it is to talk. Allowing them to ask questions, having a dialogue, being open to it, really, really helps with the results.
I think that maybe your next slide's going to touch on this again. I haven't seen the presentation, but I'm really curious to dig in as well onto how this particularly applies to these times and some of the strategies people can take when they're working from home to act on this type of a behavior in a consistent way. For me, in my perspective, and we're seeing this again, I'm biased because we're human, but we think that this only has heightened the importance of using tools to actually facilitate a lot of these conversations, because it creates a record, it creates structure for you. It allows you to make that sort of process repeatable and then easy to reflect on. Are there other things that you think are really important in terms of applying this right now that might be different than it was like 3 months ago?
Yeah, so a few things. Definitely, I completely agree with you. I think the tools are used and needed now more than ever. Like in Humi, they have that feedback tool where at any time you can go in and give some feedback, a smiley face, neutral, or sad face. Using those tools, absolutely critical. Another thing that I recommend is if you're having weekly one-on-ones or regular one-on-ones, instead of just focusing on the exact work at hand, save 5 minutes at the end for some general feedback. Just very high level, how did I do on that presentation? How did that call go? How was my report? Making that as part of your regular cadence, I think is really helpful. And then being sure, again, keeping it timely. So don't hesitate just because you're not in the same workplace anymore. If you get off a call and you have some feedback for your employee, get on the phone with them. And with that, get on the phone with them. Like when it comes to effective coaching, there's a time and a place for Slack and for email and for texting, but for good, effective coaching, I really recommend just getting on the phone, jumping on a Zoom or Google Meet. It really helps. The message get delivered and allows for that two-way feedback.
We got another question here about maybe tools that can help facilitate better performance during times like now. Obviously, again, I'm biased. I think that Humi is a great tool for this. But that being said, we even internally sometimes look to other tools to help us. When it comes to being productive, one of the key tools that we're using right now that we already had in place prior, but I think it's become even more important now that we're working from home, is a tool called Notion. That's like a information sharing platform. We believe that that's really been an effective tool in helping improve productivity because it's a great place to centralize knowledge. We've been using it more than ever to share notes on meetings that maybe people would have just popped into and joined because they were sitting next to one another. Like, you want to come to this meeting? Like, sure, like I'll sit in, kind of relevant to what I do. Well, instead we're sharing a lot of notes on meetings that are occurring and other project work that's happening amongst teams in this centralized place called Notion that other people can pop in and read about and get sort of up to speed on. In terms of performance management, obviously, again, Humi does have a whole module built in there that can be really useful. But for some teams, they're looking for more out of the box solutions that are, let's just say templated, has a built-in like weekly reminder for feedback or engagement, like things like Tiny Pulse. There's a number of others that like integrate directly with Slack for getting that type of productivity feedback. I don't know, Carly, is there any other, I know that you're a fan of Humi just as we are, but are there other tools that you think are really relevant to achieving some of this stuff?
Well, I've seen, no, definitely Humi. Tiny Pulse is a great one as well. Any kind of workplace feedback. We're seeing a lot of surveys. Like I've seen a lot of my clients putting out kind of some employee surveys, even just using SurveyMonkey or the Humi tool, just to kind of get some feedback as to how we're doing, how people are feeling. Other tools, some companies that weren't using project management softwares before, like Trello, getting on there, they're using it more than ever so that they can collaborate and know what everyone's doing. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot more of that.
We're big fans of Asana. Actually, we use Asana as our project management tool. We played with Trello. Actually, I think some teams still use Trello for like their own personal stuff. Coming back to it, I completely agree about the surveys and keeping a pulse. If you don't want to invest in a tool like Humi or Tiny Pulse, which is good for surveys, even Google has their free Forms tool. Google Forms, if you're not familiar, super simple to use. You can use it to generate your own surveys, stores all the results into a spreadsheet that's really easy to sort of, slice up and analyze. And I really agree. Yeah, somebody else mentioned 15.5 is really good for, a pulse check. There's a lot of tools out there that provide that structure that we think are worth investing in for sure. Humi being one of them, but obviously there's a lot in the market, and sometimes even the free ones can be the best for your use case.
Totally. Yeah. Now's the time to explore these tools for sure. So we just want to touch on adapting to lack of FaceTime. So there was a study in the Harvard Business Review, looking at their newly remote workers, and loneliness is one of the most common complaints. So again, people are missing this informal social interaction. So encouraging, like we spoke about, different kind of social activities that we can do that are outside of work type activities, really important. Providing those opportunities, again, make them optional. You don't want to overdo them, I will say. You don't want to have them all the time, make them mandatory, make people feel like there's more unnecessary meetings. But adding these coffee chats, these water cooler chats that would normally happen naturally, will really help employees with that feeling of loneliness. And again, just using the different technology, different tools like we talked about. So even if you're just having a quick one-on-one with your employee, it's easier to pick up the phone, set up a Zoom meeting. It's so much better to look face-to-face. And at the same time, as a leader, as an employee, when you are having this conversation, don't multitask. I mean, it's really obvious when someone's sending emails and you're having a conversation with them. Like, there's nothing worse than that. So really just having to be creative at this time.
Completely agree, though. I think that at the outset of all of this, a lot of people on our team were using Zoom calls and dialing in, like on their phone. And we had a lot of interactions with partners and clients, or even our software providers of ours, where people weren't used to doing video calls. And so they would dial in. They're used to doing conference calls when they were working from home or when they were not in the same room as the person they were talking to. And we really pushed the idea of always having your camera on. I think it just creates a whole other level of engagement, and that's super important layer.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I just wanted to touch on active listening. Again, we could talk a lot about this. Active listening is so important. Like Simon mentioned, it really helps to see your face. So to turn your camera on, to be there, to be present. Even little things like knowing where your camera is. Macs are at the top, Dells can be at the bottom. It makes a difference. It really does when you're having these conversations and you're on screens all day long, when someone's not looking here, or their face is cut off. just being aware of that, it helps with the two-way conversation. And then with all active listening, it's that focused attention, listening without reaction. So there's nothing worse when you're trying to talk to someone or tell them a story and you know they're not listening to you, they're just thinking about what they're going to say next. So as leaders, it's so important to be present with our teams, with our employees. This also goes back into acknowledging their point of view. So even if you're speaking to your employee and you're giving feedback and they don't disagree, it's important to acknowledge their view. It shows you're listening. Really critical here that, again, communication goes both ways, and confirming your understanding at the end. That helps them know, okay, they understand. I understand what they're talking about. I understand where they're coming from. Actually, and then I just have here, expect change. We're in our new normal. We're not there yet. We are in the thick of it, absolutely. The one thing I say to my leaders is try to help your team the way you'd want to be helped yourself. So try to be the leader that you want to have. Again, it is that fine balance of sharing when, things are tough, things are a roller coaster, but no one wants a Debbie Downer either. So try to be the leader you want to have, aim to be the positive change. Things are really difficult. They're really challenging right now. We still don't know what the future is going to be, but I do think there will be some positive that comes out of this. So I think, being as positive as we can while going through this difficult time will really help. Will help your overall team, your overall leadership style, and will make people feel more comfortable.
I love it. And coming back to something that you kind of mentioned on that last slide with regard to, active listening, and it really, I think, ties into a lot of the different points that you made throughout the presentation around building trust and how important that is in these times. One of the other things that we've done that I think I would recommend almost everybody do is offer sort of one-on-ones from leadership to every person on the team individually, to provide that opportunity to listen, even if that ends up being 15 minutes or half an hour, however long you want to hang out, of, just talking about how much you miss sports or, how much you miss the office. There's a lot of value in providing that opportunity to listen. And I think that that's a really, really, really important point that you made, is being that active listener and offering that ear as much as you can. But yeah, this whole thing. So we've got another question coming in here too, for you.
Sure.
What do you think the biggest leadership challenge will be when people start to return to the office? What would you be anticipating in terms of that whole going from this to back into working, and how that's going to impact leadership?
So I think the biggest challenge, which we're already getting signs of, are people's different perspectives on coming back to work. I think there are some people who are just ready to get out. They're ready to get back in the office. They want to go back to normal. There's others who love working from home and don't want to get back. And there's also people who are really, really scared. There's people who are scared and have a lot of anxiety about the pandemic and about the virus. So I think the challenge is going to be managing all these different outlooks, managing what the new world of work is going to look like. We don't know yet. We don't know what our government mandates are going to be. So I think it will be challenging figuring out the mix between back in the office, but still having this remote work, and no one really knows what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the biggest thing I'm anticipating in terms of most companies facing this challenge is, well, there was this whole transition to working from home, but everybody was doing that together. And I think that when we go back to work, whether it's because people are scared to be taking public transit to get into the office, government regulation saying you need to work at half capacity, or any other multitude of reasons why everybody can't be in the office at the same time, people are going to have to adapt to office work and remote work at the same time. we once interviewed somebody, we really, really, really wanted to hire her, senior developer, awesome candidate. She wanted to work from home full time. And this was at a time when we were open to, we had a flexible work from home policy. You're allowed to work from home whenever you want. But we didn't have anybody working from home full time. And she ended up passing on our offer. And she said that the reason was she didn't think that we were ready to be, and she didn't believe that anybody ever could be in a position where there was full-time work from home and full-time work in office people at the same company. Like that, those cultures clash. And I think that we're going to see this huge clashing of those two things happening when people go back into the office. We used to share an office space with a team of people who had like these robot tablet things that were their remote workers. It was really weird. It was this like futuristic, crazy like company, and they had these like Segway devices with tablets on them, and they would come to meetings with them. That was like overkill. But how do you make people feel involved when they're working from home and three of the people who are in the meeting are actually in the office and you're the lone person sitting, you know, at your desk at home? How do you create an environment where people who are at home and aren't in office are feeling included? Like, I think that's going to be a major challenge that we're trying to think through right now in terms of how we balance that. And what we're doing is starting by polling people in the company around what they want to do when they return, whenever it is that there is a return, you know, where their heads are at now, so that we can start planning for who's in office, who isn't, what's the strategy around, you know, reintroducing people to the space while accommodating for, you know, people's own preferences, and then the challenges that will come from having teams broken into different areas. So yeah, I think that's a huge one.
Yeah, I'm right with you there.
And on that note, you know, we're at the hour mark. If there's any additional questions, feel free to email us or Carly. I'm sure that she'd be happy to chat.
Yeah.
We certainly are too. A couple of people asked about circulating the deck. We'll do that. We're going to be making, you know, we'll also circulate the recording of the webinar. I didn't mention earlier, but for anybody who hasn't joined the webinars previously, we do have a database of all of the webinars we've hosted during COVID. We'll share the link right now here in the chat. And so, yeah, you know, this will exist on the internet forever. Feel free to share it with friends if you found it valuable. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Carly, for hosting. Great content, as always. You know, really, really appreciate your time.
It was great to be here. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Simon.
See you guys.